Hello everyone, welcome back to the workshop. Today we're going to be machining on this big weldment, and you might have seen it in the short the other day, but this here is the top half of a power hammer. 50-pound power hammer. It's going to be a Bradley strap type hammer. I'll try to find a picture to inset here. This is something I've been wanting to build really ever since I got into blacksmithing and forging. A power hammer is an incredibly useful tool. If you don't know a power hammer, if you break it down to its essentials, it's a large weight that is picked up and dropped onto an even larger weight that acts as an anvil. That's the essentials. It's just a big chunk of steel that lifts and drops. Some hammers will push it down as it drops. The ways that they lift and drop it are way different across all the different kinds of hammers. Some of them use air, hydraulics, boards. This one is going to use a beam. This one is going to have a beam that runs across the top here that lifts and lowers the ram, and the ram is going to be connected to that beam with straps, as you guys might have seen in this photo I showed you. So you might be looking at this setup and thinking, wow, that's kind of weird. Well, this weldment is a pretty good size for this milling machine. It probably weighs 200 pounds. And it's big, dimensionally speaking. From the bottom down here to the top is 25 inches. And for a milling machine like this, that's kind of pushing the limits, but with a universal head, you can do all sorts of really weird stuff. I have this head flipped up with the spindle on the top pointing that way. That gives me an incredible work envelope. I can put some very big weldments on here if I really want to. And if you're worried about a 200, 300 pound weldment on here, just know that when I tried to find the weight limit for this machine, I found a forum of a guy asking if he can put a 700 pound casting right in the center. And a bunch of old machinists who'd worked with K&Ts for many years, who'd machined with them in production and in job shops, they said, I wouldn't put more than 2, maybe 3 of those 700 pound castings on the table at the same time. So I'm pretty sure this weldment here is going to be good. For that boring bar to temper, let's do another thing that needs to get done for the power hammer, which is cut the cylinder off of this little 5-horse Briggs & Stratton engine. I'm using the crankshaft and the connecting rod and the bearings, essentially, of this little motor as the crankshaft that I need for my power hammer. I need to transmit rotational motion into linear motion, and that's what this is going to be doing. I don't need the cylinder, and it's going to interfere with the arm, so I got to lop it off, and I tried to mill it off, but this casting is pretty flimsy, and so the milling put too much pressure on it, didn't like that, so I'm going to cut it off with the hacksaw. And we're going to see how well this saw does, even though it's not finished and it's not done. So that did pretty good. Not perfect. Did wander a little bit. I still need to make a bunch of adjustments to it, but I'm pretty happy with that, to be honest. It was quite loud, but I mean, the whole thing's not finished, so. And it had a lot of downfeed pressure because there's all of this weight up here, and there's nothing controlling the descent. It's just gravity. And this was relatively thin aluminum, so Yeah, let's go see if the boring bar is done. So the boring bar is done tempering. It's still a lot more flexible than I would really like. It's not the end of the world, really. As long as it gives me a relatively smooth finish, it doesn't have to be perfect, and the pin that is going in here is going to be matching the bore. So I'm not making this bore any specific size, I'm just making it smooth, concentric, and accurate. So let's get to it.
This one is called Saskatchewan in 1881.
That was a good year.
It was a great year.
One of the best years in Saskatchewan.
Yeah. Mr. Toronto man, go away from my door. You got my weed and canola seed, you're asking me for more. Better fly, for I produce my 44. I'm just a prairie boy, never meant none no harm. Spend my days making wages out on the Martin's farm. No eastern boys are gonna twist my arm. It's so damn cold out here, the wind will cut you half in two. I ain't kidding now, my old plow is frozen to my mule. I've been living off ice cold rainbow stew. Don't be picking fights with no
Well, it's the next day. You guys saw the bore getting machined, and now I'm set up to machine the way. It took me a little bit to kind of figure out how in the world I want to machine this way. The universal head is as far out as it'll go. The part is tilted at a 30-degree angle. The universal head is tilted at a 15-degree angle, this way. So that should give me 45 for these dovetails. I thought about all the different ways I could set it up, and nothing else really would have worked. This almost didn't work. I have about an inch of clearance between whenever I raise the table up and the end mill is coming off the bottom of the part here. There's about an inch of clearance between the bottom of the universal head and the table. Well, I've run into another roadblock with this damn thing. This chunk of round bar that's welded on here is tilted that way quite a bit. Down here there's about a 1/4 inch gap between the cutter and the piece of steel, which is slightly annoying. The only way I can really solve that is by raising up the entire weldment, but if I do that, it's going to throw everything off. If I raise up one end of the weldment, it's going to cause issues. It's hanging off of the table right now. It's hanging off the table. So if I put a shim right under here and it raises it up, then these two plates are not going to be contacting in the same place. I'd have to probably put a shim here and then a shim here, and then that would be my contact area. And this is already pretty rocky. It's not very stable. It's not held down super well. So I think at this point, because this is a personal project, instead of machining that dovetail, because it has given me significant amounts of grief, instead of machining this dovetail on the hammer itself, I'm just going to take an angle grinder and cut out a 90-degree slice and then fit it to the ram. This chunk of 5-inch, this here is going to be the ram. And I'll have to cut dovetails into that. So, yeah. I will machine the opposite dovetail. I will machine the dovetails that are in the rim itself. These dovetails here that are on the hammer itself, I think I'll just cut those with an angle grinder. That's kind of disappointing. I was really hoping to be able to machine these, but I just don't have sharp cutters. It's hanging out a bunch. It's not very stable. There's a point where you got to just say, hey, I can't do this. And I think I've reached that point. Well, that's a pretty big disappointment. I was really hoping to be able to machine this, but it's a big awkward part, and it's kind of been frustrating me. I'm sure if a customer came to me and had deeper pockets and said, hey, you know, I need this done and I need it to be machined within a certain tolerance, then I could probably do it. I could lay this down on the table. I can't lay it down and use the y-axis to machine it because I don't have enough travel on the y-axis. I don't think I could use the x-axis because then there's not enough room between the column and the universal head to get it done. I think the best way to do this really would be with double angle cutters. They're basically milling cutters, but instead of flat, they form a V groove, not a groove, but a V way. What I'm trying to do, they would form a V way. I think that would be the easiest way to do that, to do this, is to use one of those versus what I'm doing. But I'm just going to cut it with an angle grinder, make sure the surfaces are flat, and then I'll use either spray paint or some other dye. I do have some Prussian glue to match the ram to the way itself. This still was an interesting project. It was definitely a learning curve. Something I could throw under my belt as an amateur machinist. So I think I'll have to jerry rig up my crane again to get this thing off and get it out of the shop, get it outside so I can machine the way, or not machine it, but grind it, and overall clean up this thing because I need to clean it up. So, well, if you enjoyed this video despite the disappointment, then please like and subscribe. I will be showing more content soon. I don't know if I'm going to be showing the machining of the ram and all that. It's relatively simple stuff. It's not just a V-way, and I'm going to be going with dovetail dies versus bolt-on dies. A lot of people use bolt-on, but I have the option to use dovetail dies, and so I will. It should be a good hammer regardless. This really shouldn't affect it, having to grind that as opposed to machine it, as long as I am good with my grinder. I am going to be reinforcing it because as I was machining it, I could see the whole thing flex, and so that's not good. I don't want it to flex at all with it being a hammer and all. So, thank you for watching, and have a good day.